some exercise. Let's see if we can name these three compounds. Compound number one, of course, you can pause the video and quickly name it yourself and see if you got the following. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4 carbons, and so the prefix would be met, et, prop, bute. The prefix would be bute, right? Buta, and there will only be single bonds between the carbons, so the suffix is ane. So this is butane. Substance number 2 has 2 carbons on the chain and a functional group which is CCl. So it's a haloalkane. So you have to say what specific halogen is substituted onto the main chain. Well, it's chlorine, so it becomes chloro. And so this is chloro. How many carbons are there? There's 2 carbons. So met et. This is chloroethane. There's only a single bond between the carbons, so the prefix becomes ane, and it is chloroethane. You could also call it 1-chloroethane because we start numbering the carbons closest to the substituted or to the functional group. In this case, it is a haloalkane, so you start closest to the halogen, right? So it is 1-chloroethane. Substance number 3, let's have a look. So there are 1, 2, 3 carbons, it looks to me like. Oh, but now you see the chain also bending downwards. So it could also go 1, 2, 3, 4 carbons in the chain. Remember, we always choose the longest chain to be the root name of our chain, and then you substitute all the other groups or chains, right? And in this case, we call it a substituted group. This is, as you know, a methyl group. It was methane, CH4, but it has 1 less hydrogen. So the suffix of methane changes to -il if it loses a hydrogen. So methyl or methyl is that substituted group. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 carbons on the main chain. You've got a methyl group, but now you have to know where to start numbering. You always start numbering closest to the functional group. You might think the functional group here is methyl because it's a substituent or it's a substituted group, but no. If you can just look at the double bond over here, you will see that that is actually a functional group. So this is an alkene. So double and triple bonds always trump any other substituted group onto the chain in the naming or nomenclature. So you're going to start numbering from the carbon closest to the double bond. So this is carbon 1, carbon 2, 3, and carbon 4. Now we can name our substance properly. So we know that the prefix would be methyl, right? Where does that methyl sit? It sits on carbon 2. So this is 2-methyl. And then we know this is 1, 2, 3, 4, met, et, prop, bute. This is a butene, right? You might think this is butane to start out with, but then the suffix of that root name should be -ene because it's an alkene. So it's 2-methyl butene. But now you have to specify as well where the -ene is sitting. And we always give the number of the lowest carbon in the naming of an alkene or alkyne. So you have to squeeze it in there, and maybe let's just take this -ene part away and give the number of where exactly the double bond is sitting. It sits on carbon, between carbon 1 and 2, so the lowest number gets the naming, and it is but1-ene. Take note that between any number and letter, there should always be a hyphen or a dash. And there is no space whatsoever between the prefix and the suffix or the main root part of the name. We only ever have a space in naming of esters, right, where the part that came from the alcohol is written separate from the part that comes from the carboxylic acid. And this is how we name organic